Hello. So today I wanted to discuss a specific word, but it has several meanings, and it really kind of hit home today. And so I thought I would discuss it. And so that word is critical. Now, it has like three different meanings, and how you decide to sign it is important. So the first one is it is critical. It's important. So I just signed it, right? So you take your F hand shapes and you start here and you go up. Important. It's critical. It's very important. This is a critical time. Something that's very important. Mission critical, right? And so it's something that's very important. It's critical. Or you can be critical, right? So that means it's more of a criticism, or you can be critical. And so that's when I take my non-dominant hand. For me, that's my left hand, and with my right hand, with my one hand shape, I put an X on it. Critical, like a critique. Oh, she's critical. Her personality is very critical. She's being critical. And I use that a lot because it's the easiest way to get that concept of critical. Now, if it's a critical mission, or it's very critical that you do this, then I do use important. But for a lot of other things, I use critical. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be a criticism. And so you have to look at your deaf person. But the third most correct way to use that concept of critical, like critical writing, or I want you to do a critical analysis. And in fact, analysis is the sign we're going to use, because that's what is talking about. I want it to be a critical analysis. I want it to be a critical writing. So we take our V hand shape and we do the sign for analysis. And it could be self-analysis when we do it closer to our body. I've done this sign on many times, and I've also discussed it. So that's when you self-evaluate, you want to analyze, you want to unpack it. If this is a critical thing, you're analyzing something. So if you have critical writing, so analytical writing, or I want to have, even if you want to use a critique, you're analyzing it. But I remember years ago, I was interpreting an art class, and so they would have critique day. Well, it was critique day, XX, because they were analyzing it, but they were also pointing out the negatives and the positive, right? So critique, it could be criticism negative. It's not always negative when you are critiquing something, but Xing out seems to be more of a negative connotation. So I think that, and I looked at it because I was kind of pondering it, and you could do more of a deep, like, I want you to think critically, right? So if you say I want you to think critically, you could say I want you to think deeply about, or I want you to think about the different perspectives. Or if you were going to have like a debate team, so you have to be critical, which means you're going to say, oh, I want to see this side. What is that perspective? And then this one. So I want to compare and contrast, right? So if you say, I want you to have critical thinking. So you could even say, think different perspectives. But if you're just kind of just putting it out there, sometimes that thought process is not there. But everyone knows, or a lot of deaf people and people who know sign language, that this means critique or criticism. So you can even use that at critical. I want you to think critically. I want you to write a critical paper. I want you to think critically about blah blah blah. And so you're thinking, well, I don't. But yeah, if you have like a paper that you're writing in college, you need to have two perspectives. You need to compare and conflict, contrast. So compare, contrast, conflict. I want the different perspectives. or I want the positives and the negatives. So if you are speaking, you could say that, to think critically or to write critically. But if someone said that, you're going, So maybe instantaneously your thought goes, oh, critique. And I think that's okay. But it's good to know different ways to sign something. It's good to know to have it inside that file in your brain, like a file cabinet, and file it away. Like critical thinking, a critique, because those are all kinds of means the same thing. It's like I need to have different perspectives. I need to have a positive and a negative perspective. If you were writing a paper, you would need to, are you analyzing the subject, or are you trying to find different perspectives? So think about how you use that word critical, 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 critical. And so, and it's how it's used. Sometimes we don't have time to ponder and think about how are they using that. I need to find a sign, so like if you were helping a friend, but if you were just having a conversation and you're thinking, well, I went, I'm getting a degree in art, and we went, and today was critique day, and I am upset because my art was just, picked on. So that could be a criticism, right? But really, they were looking at the positives and the negatives. And so then that other person could say, well, did they have any positive things to say about the critique? See, you could use that. And you're going, well, they said, yes, the color was good. Okay. So it's the different ways that it's used. It could be analytical writing. What is analytical writing, right? What if someone doesn't know? What if they're going to college or high school, and the teacher said, oh, we want to have some critical writing. You could say analytical writing, but they're going, what's analytical writing? Oh, they want you to take that subject, and then they want you to have a positive or negative, or they want you to compare and contrast the different perspectives, a positive and a negative. And that takes time to really interpret that concept. So it depends on how much time you have, if you're becoming an interpreter or you're just discussing it with a friend. If you're discussing it or you're trying to explain something, then you have that time for critical writing, different perspective. Like for your child, and the teacher says, and they have a paper and they bring home, say, for homework, I want you to have critical writing about, seawater, desalination, desalting, salination, salt, desalting, the ocean water. So what does that mean, critical writing? Well, they want you to tell the positives and the negatives about desalting the seawater. They want you to compare, contrast, to show different. Is it a positive, a negative? Can it be both? Or what's positive? Does that outweigh it more? And then you need to decide which you would decide. If you could vote for desalination of seawater, what would you choose? And why? And how? How would you decide that? So it's not a really quick when you're talking about, an analysis, a critical analysis about a paper or about a book. So that would take some more, expansion. Not explaining per se, but expansion on that concept so they understand fully. And then they may have a sign of going, oh, well, let's make it quicker. Let's just use analytical writing, analytical thinking. And I know what that means now, right? Or you could do criticism, critical writing. Because in a sense, it does seem like it's criticism, right? When you do critical writing, because you're doing positives and negatives, right? A critique is positives and negatives. So like a design, like, oh, I'm in design school and I need to have a critique. Tell me what's good or what's bad or what's positive or what's negative about this and why. So sometimes concepts take more signs, but once you have that person know the definition, then you can kind of truncate it. Like, how would you sign that? How do you want me to sign that? Or how would you sign it if someone says we're having a critique of your work, or we want to have critical writing or analysis? So anyway, so we have 4 choices, right? So that's the good thing. I love choices because sometimes people say, oh no, I would use this one for that. I understand you're saying critical. Like, but it's not, everything's not important. I need critical writing, important writing. Not really, you're really you're analyzing it, or you're trying to find the comparison, what's, or the negative, positive, the what's conflicting about it. So this is conflicting and this is the opposite. So if you're going to have compare and contrast, right? Compare what's the same and contrast what's different. So you could even say, I want you to tell me what these 2 books, what's the same and what's different. How is it contrast? How is it opposite? And does any of that kind of blend, right? 2 different people or 2 different things, entities, and it comes together. And this is what we use for mainstream, but it also can mean how does it come together and how does it blend, right? So anyway, practice, ponder it. How would you see it in a sentence? Do you hear it in a sentence? And then you can decide how you want to sign it. And especially, it is the deaf language. How do they sign it? And use that with that person or in that context. Okay, I will see you later. Practice. Bye.